register for diversity immigrant and visa lottery to pay a $250 fee, which CBO has estimated will raise billions of dollars in additional revenue. These and other resources and fees in this reconciliation text will ensure that the Trump administration has the adequate resources to enforce the immigration laws in a fiscally responsible way. The committee's bill also provides resources to improve the activities of agencies in the rulemaking process. These resources will make agencies more efficient and effective by requiring that they adequately account for the cost imposed by rulemaking activity and by consolidating authorities that are currently spread across the government. The measures in our package are necessary to provide the resources to improve immigration, enforcement, and regulatory improvement. I urge all members to support the committee's reconciliation package, and I yield back and now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, it must be tough to be an authoritarian. You promise everybody the world to get elected. Prices will go down on day one. No more inflation. We're going to end Russia's war on Ukraine. The world's going to respect us. And then you get in, and even though you inherit an economy from your predecessor that's described as the envy of the world by The Economist magazine, you crash everything. The economy today is shrinking. The stock market is sinking. Inflation is soaring. $7 trillion in American retirements and wealth has been destroyed. You've plunged us with your imbecilic tariffs into a trade war with the whole world, except, of course, for your bosom buddies in Russia. So now, only 100 days in, with 100 unforced policy blunders, you're the most unpopular president at this point in your presidency in more than 80 years. Barack Obama stood at 69% in the polls. Ronald Reagan was at 73% in the polls. Truman was 87%, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, 68%. But Donald Trump is at 39%, the lowest 100-day approval rating since polling began. He controlled the agenda for 100 days. He controlled the House. He controlled the Senate. He's got everything going for him, and his numbers are in the gutter. So now he reaches back into the authoritarian playbook. Go back and please the wealthiest people and corporations in the country. House Republicans want to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid, food assistance for mothers and children, veterans benefits, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, any programs that help actual people, all in order to pay for another gargantuan tax break for the president's billionaire benefactors. And here in the Judiciary Committee, our good friends want to help Donald Trump use his power in violation of the Constitution that we are all sworn to uphold and defend against enemies, foreign and domestic. Every day, the administration uses immigration enforcement as a template to erode constitutional rights and liberties. They round up people in the street and disappear them to the torture prison of a foreign dictator without 1 minute of due process, sweeping up completely innocent people who have no criminal record and no criminal charges, in the midst of other people who may have criminal records and criminal charges and should stand prosecution for them if they do have charges against them. They're stripping college and graduate students at American universities of their visas for writing op-eds that the administration disagrees with. They invoke emergency wartime powers like the Alien Enemies Act to fight a military invasion at the border while telling us that the border has never been safer than it is right now. My colleagues say all these measures are necessary to deport gang members, violent criminals, the worst of the worst. But they're not targeting the worst of the worst. They're arresting judges now. They're using federal agents to round up law-abiding members of the community with no criminal records, parents of American children, husbands and wives of American spouses, people who've not been shown to pose any public safety threat at all. They're breaking into cars to arrest mothers as their children's watch in terror. They're arresting people who are coming in for their citizenship interviews. They're staking out people's homes and trolling through IRS taxpayer data in search of tax-paying people to deport. Look, we know how to remove people from the country who should not be here. President Biden's administration did that. We know how to do it legally, consistent with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But the Trump administration has discarded the rule of law. If he can sweep non-citizens off the street and fly them to a torturer's prison in El Salvador with no due process, he can do it to citizens too. Because if there's no due process, if there's no fair hearing, you've got no opportunity to object. And indeed, several American citizen children, including one with cancer, were flown to Honduras last week with no due process, as a Trump-appointed judge in Louisiana found. Now the courts have issued more than 95 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders against this reign of lawlessness. But Republicans want to enable President Trump to keep going. This Judiciary Committee bill seeks to strip the courts of their power to hold an administration in contempt when the president violates explicit judicial court orders. And it doesn't stop there. While they try to defund the courts, they're forking over an astonishing $81 billion to the administration for more of these immigration roundups. The legislation includes a whopping $45 billion for ICE on top of its annual budget of $9 billion for family and adult detention centers alone. This bill is a blank check to the administration to do more of what we've already seen. And to make matters worse, as they race to spend more than $81 additional billion on this, Trump's own DOJ is terminating hundreds of millions of dollars in existing grants. They're cutting funding for county, state, and local law enforcement. They're cutting funding for opioid addiction treatment programs. They're cutting funding for crime prevention, and they're cutting funding for victims of rape, sexual assault, and violent crimes. The grants being cut support local police in solving and preventing crime. They help the survivors of abuse and assault navigate the legal system, and yet they're being wiped out by the Department of Justice. They're also trying to handcuff the agencies that work to make sure our food and drugs are safe and our air and water are clean. The REINS Act is buried in here. It would prevent the government from enforcing our civil rights, protecting workplace safety, and guarding against misconduct by banks. It would require both houses of Congress and the president to approve every major rule from our agencies to take effect, virtually guaranteeing no effective regulatory action on any subject. They've also tucked the Midnight Rules Relief Act in here, which would allow Republicans to bundle hundreds of regulations all together into a single package and vote them down on a single jumbo resolution, which would be used to hide the most destructive deregulatory votes among dozens of others, completely burying it in darkness. Look, this version of an authoritarian America is not what the American people want. Please take note, this is why Donald Trump's polling numbers are in the gutter and an historic low. This is not what the American people are looking for. We urge our colleagues to walk back from the brink here to support many amendments we plan to offer today that will save us money, that will actually address the real problems of the country, and that will protect the constitutional rights and freedoms that we cherish so much in America. This is a test. Are we going to stand up for the majority of the American people, for our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and the freedoms we fought for, or are we going to stand with a president who wants to throw it all away? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All other opening statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognize himself, excuse me, for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature
without
of
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purposes of amendment. The chair is recognized to explain the amendment. The amendment in the nature of a substitute makes a small change to section 70115 to clarify that the funds made available to the Office of Refugee Resettlement may be used to transport UACs in their custody. The amendment also makes a few technical changes, such as correcting typographical errors that do not affect the substance of the committee print. I urge adoption of the amendment and yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Donald Trump was narrowly voted into office on the strength of a number of promises. He told us, quote, "Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again to bring down the prices of all goods." He said of the war in Ukraine, quote, "They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying, and I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. He even said, quote, "I will get it settled before I even become president." And shortly before his inauguration, he bragged that the stock market had surged because of his election. He called it, quote, "the Trump effect." Well, here we are 100 days later, and we're really seeing the Trump effect in action. The stock market has plunged because of his chaotic and catastrophic tariffs. The middle class is struggling to stay afloat as prices remain high, and war still rages in Ukraine. With the economy teetering on the brink of collapse, our international alliances fraying, and wars tearing nations apart across the globe, this country is facing serious challenges that require serious solutions. So what the House Republicans think our country most needs right now? Big surprise. Tax cuts for billionaires. It is their tried and true answer for everything. Although their plan would add trillions of dollars in debt, which would put to rest once and for all the fiction that they actually care about the deficit, their plan also cuts $1.5 trillion in vital programs that Americans rely on. They want to gut Medicaid, which would deprive seniors, children, people with disabilities, and working families of needed health care services. They want to cut student loan programs, and they want to slash SNAP and other nutrition assistance programs for the most vulnerable among us. These cuts would be on top of the near dismantling of the government currently being carried out by Elon Musk and his merry band of teenage hackers. While DOGE is busy tearing apart government agencies, firing workers en masse, slashing the basic medical and other basic research that provides the foundation of our future economic prosperity, and slashing services for the American people, the world's richest man stands to reap billions of dollars in government contracts and massive tax cuts from a grateful Republican Congress. That tells you everything you need to know about the priorities of our Republican colleagues. The Judiciary Committee's contribution to this boondoggle for billionaires includes a hodgepodge of items that have been on the Republican wish list for years, such as a slate of anti-regulatory bills and other measures that are little more than giveaways to big business at the expense of individuals, families, small businesses, and states. But the lion's share of this proposal would devote tens of billions of dollars to promoting the Trump administration's cruel, inhumane, and lawless immigration policies. In just 100 days, the administration has shredded fundamental notions of due process, attempted to rewrite the 14th Amendment, and defied courts that are holding the administration to account. It is a breathtaking assault on the Constitution, and the Republican Congress has done nothing but cheer them on from the sidelines. But now they want to get in on the action, helping the White House to turbocharge its extreme anti-immigrant agenda. Instead of spending $45 billion on warehousing immigrants in detention facilities, as this bill would do, we could be shoring up Medicaid, student loans, and SNAP. Instead of enabling the administration's illegal and unconstitutional mass deportation scheme, we could be holding hearings on why U.S. citizens as young as 2 years old are being deported with no meaningful due process, or why a 4-year-old citizen with stage 4 metastatic cancer was deported without medication or the ability to contact their doctor. Instead of spending tens of billions of dollars on a reckless, chaotic, and unconstitutional immigration enforcement regime, we could be working to restore more than $800 million in grants that the administration recently cut from the Department of Justice. These are funds to provide assistance to victims of domestic violence, trafficking, and violent crime, to support efforts to reduce recidivism, and to provide support for local police departments and correctional facilities, among other grants. But here we are instead, providing massive funds to help the Trump administration continue to separate families, decimate our economy, and strike fear in our communities. I urge my colleagues to oppose this dangerous legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Georgia, and then the gentlelady from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans ran for office saying that they would fight for everyday Americans who were struggling to afford rent and buy eggs. But today, they are leading a GOP spending bill that is an all-out assault on working families, seniors, and anyone who is just trying to get by. Here in the Judiciary Committee, we are considering one part of a larger package that prioritizes tax breaks for Trump's billionaire buddies like, like Elon Musk at the expense of the rest of us. This isn't leadership, it's betrayal. Americans deserve a government committed to uplifting every family, not a rigged system that takes health care and Social Security away from you and your loved ones so that they can line the pockets of billionaires like Elon Musk. Apparently, Trump and MAGA Republicans think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and their billionaire buddies need another yacht or another mega mansion more than you need your insulin, your Social Security checks, or a nursing home for your aging parents. That's just not right. We must reject this budget reconciliation bill because our nation's prosperity should be measured by how well ordinary Americans thrive, not by how happy we make mega billionaires like co-President Trump. Excuse me, well, Trump is a billionaire too, like co-President Musk. I reject the larger package, but I also want to talk for a minute about the judiciary piece of this spending bill. There are so many ways, excuse me, we could spend money within our committee's jurisdiction that would make our lives better. We could put money towards gun violence prevention, towards finding and helping missing and exploited children, towards supporting Second Chance Act recipients who are trying to reintegrate into our communities, and towards so many other programs that would strengthen our communities. Instead, this is a bill aimed at shutting out all immigrants and locking up children in unlicensed, private for-profit facilities for unlimited amounts of time at taxpayer expense. It's about preventing our government from going after businesses that cheat and overcharge you and that evade paying the taxes that they owe. It's about preventing the government from keeping your air clean and your water safe. And it's about making sure that Donald Trump's administration cannot be held to account when they violate the Constitution. I oppose the judiciary piece of this reconciliation package, and I will strongly oppose Trump's spending package when it comes to the floor because I support the everyday people, not Trump's billionaire buddies. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the 100 days since taking office, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and their Department of Greed and Ego have taken a literal chainsaw to our government, eliminating and threatening programs that help people in every corner of this country, both red and blue. Trump's policies are destroying the strong economy that he inherited from Democrats. In the last quarter of 2024, our economy grew by 2.4%. But in just the first 100 days of Trump's administration, our economy has shrunk by 0.3%. It is the worst quarter we've experienced since 2022. And it's no surprise that Americans' confidence in our economy has dropped for the 5th month in a row and is at its lowest level since the start of the COVID pandemic. 100 days of anxiety, chaos, and complete destruction. The bill that we're marking up today will not stem the tide. It's a betrayal of the middle class, and it's going to destroy the infrastructure that every American depends on. Millions of children, low-income seniors, and people with disabilities will become uninsured and see their health costs dramatically increase. The bill includes, at minimum, $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid. And let's be clear, this isn't a red state or a blue state issue. 1 in 3 Americans depend on Medicaid for their health coverage. We're talking about nursing homes for 5 out of 8 seniors and stealing health care from 38 million kids across the country. That's over 800,000 kids in my home state, over 3 million kids in Texas, and about 1.2 million kids in Ohio. It's just cruel. Now, remember when Trump said he'd lower costs for Americans? This bill would cut crucial food assistance by at least 20%. Never mind that 4 out of 5 households that rely on SNAP have a child, a senior, or a person with disability. And what we're considering today in this committee would make things even worse when it comes to our ability to lower prices. This bill would eliminate the Federal Trade Commission, an agency tasked with protecting consumers and promoting competition. Just last year, the FTC successfully blocked a grocery store merger between Kroger and Albertsons, 2 of the largest supermarket chains in our country and certainly in my home state of Washington. Blocking this merger preserved competition in grocery stores throughout the country. If we're serious about lowering prices, we should be giving the FTC more resources to fight corporate monopolies and even the playing field so that small businesses and startups can thrive and consumers can get better services at affordable prices. The immigration provisions in this bill just facilitate the illegal and unconstitutional actions that target immigrants of all immigration statuses, including U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, foreign students, and even U.S. citizen children who are in the midst of cancer treatment and have been deported. And for all the talk from some Republicans on the other side, every time we have a discussion on immigration about how we love people who come here and do things legally, the so-called immigration fees that are in this bill are really fines and nothing but a cruel attempt to make immigrating to this country impossible. It's especially horrific in how it would treat unaccompanied children, effectively ending the U.S. protection system for kids by blocking them from accessing life-saving anti-trafficking protections that were established in the bipartisan Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. So when we talk about how this bill is a Republican betrayal of the middle class, it's not just that. It's immoral, it's cruel, it's an all-out assault on everything that we hold dear. It's promises made and promises broken by an administration that cares more about the for-profit prison operators that bankroll Republican campaigns than the young U.S. citizen children who have been deported from their country of birth. That cares more about big pharma CEOs than families that rely on Medicaid. That cares more about insurance shareholders than seniors getting ripped off. Republicans are allowing stealing from everyday Americans just so they can lower taxes for the biggest corporations and wealthiest billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. This Republican betrayal is the largest redistribution of money from working class Americans to the wealthy. And it's being done on the backs of our kids, our seniors, our families, our U.S. citizens, our legal permanent residents, people who have been here contributing to this country. It is unbridled greed, corruption, and cruelty, and I will be voting against it. I yield back.
The gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word. House Republicans have spent the last 3 months insisting that they are the party of working people, that they care about the struggles of working people. And now they have control of the House, they have control of the Senate, they have control of the White House, and they actually could be doing something about it. And yet, instead of passing legislation to make life easier and more affordable, they are doing the opposite. This bill is a betrayal of working people. It's a betrayal of the middle class. So let's start with the overall plan here. Republicans are proposing a massive cut to social services in this country. Services that my constituents in Vermont rely on. I'm thinking about the nearly 164,000 Vermonters on Medicaid who are at risk of losing their health care. The Republican legislation means parents and grandparents who rely on Medicaid for long-term care and nursing homes for their family members. They're gonna have that rug pulled out from under them. It means that rural hospitals, not just in Vermont, but in all of your rural districts, are going to close too. It's just a math problem. Medicaid goes away, rural hospitals close. The Republican majority and Donald Trump want to kick working families to the curb and give people who don't need another massive tax break another leg up. The wealthiest 1% in this country do not need more advantages. They have plenty. These cuts are a crystal clear indication of where your priorities lie. Now let's talk about what is on the agenda for this committee specifically. With this slice of the reconciliation plan, Judiciary Republicans will be doubling down on Trump's lawlessness and cruel immigration policies, fueling Trump's attacks on our independent judiciary and making it easier for big businesses to get away with price gouging and making it more expensive for regular people to survive. Today, my Republican colleagues are voting for sky-high fees for folks who are just trying to comply with immigration laws. Does anyone really think that somebody who is fleeing to our country for relief as a refugee can afford hundreds or thousands of dollars to seek asylum or their day in court. It's nonsense, and you know it. And with these fees leveraged on those who can least afford it, Republicans are dedicating billions of dollars to hire and empower an immigration enforcement reign of terror. They want to greenlight more masked agents, more hooded people, more unmarked cars, yanking people off the streets, deporting them without any due process. This is America. This is what actually sets us apart from people in the rest of the world, is due process. You can laugh all you want, but if we don't stand up for due process, we are not the United States of America anymore. The bill in front of us will allow Republicans to further insulate this administration when it flagrantly violates the law and the Constitution, making it harder for courts to stop illegal actions. My Republican colleagues are once again using their position, instead of helping working people, they're using their position to attack judges, to attack the very foundations of what makes us Americans. And you're trying to shutter the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, making it harder for us to enforce our antitrust laws. Let's talk about fairness. Let's talk about competition. Let's talk about all my small businesses who just want a fair shot. Why would you go after the FTC and make it harder for small businesses to survive in this landscape? You all talk about competition. You all talk about a healthy process in this country, to have competition, to have a healthy economy, and then you go after the FTC. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't pass the straight face test. It's all more of the same in here. You are not looking out for working people. You are not standing up for small businesses. You're not standing up for rural America. You're not standing up for our rural hospitals. You're not standing up for the people who desperately need Medicaid in order to get basic health care. When I vote no on this Republican budget, I'm going to be thinking of all the working people in Vermont who sent me here to work on behalf of them, not big corporations, not authoritarians who are would-be dictators, to work on behalf of them. And I will be thinking of all of the immigrants, those who have become part of the fabric of Vermont's economy and our communities, who are heartlessly being attacked by my Republican colleagues today. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Today, judiciary Republicans are jamming through a bill to flush billions of taxpayer dollars into the cesspool that is this administration's lawless, chaotic, cruel, and dishonest immigration agenda. In doing so, they're using this committee once again to vilify immigrants and push a false narrative, otherwise known as lies, that have led to the wrongful arrest and deportation of U.S. citizens, outrageous attacks on the First Amendment rights of green card and visa holders, and the detention and deportation of long-time contributing members of our communities. That includes people who've been deported by mistake, without due process, and in some cases without cause, in violation of court orders, to a prison in El Salvador which is infamous for its depravity and dangerous conditions. And rather than owning its errors, this administration is refusing to bring home those it has wrongfully deported and imprisoned in that hellhole, using our taxpayer dollars. Meanwhile, our Republican colleagues are backing this administration's campaign of fear and lawlessness, whether by cheering it on or turning a blind eye and a deaf ear. They're standing by as this White House attacks judges, denies people due process, defies the court, and lies about what it's doing. This is not keeping our communities safe, and it's not immigration enforcement. It's un-American attacks on the truth, on people, and on the law. It's authoritarianism, and that's just it. Today, it may look like just attacking immigrants, but no one should kid themselves. It's clear the rights of every single person in this country are at stake. Because if you don't stand up and protect an immigrant's right to due process, then you don't support anyone's right to due process. Because if the government can deport someone based on false or unverified claims without proof that someone is a criminal or a gang member, or even without proof that someone is not a citizen, then the government can jail or deport anyone, including my friends here. Without due process, every one of us is defenseless against a government that can do whatever it wants if it is not held accountable. The truth is that if this administration can deny the rights of some people, there's nothing stopping it from denying the rights of all people all across America. Just as there's nothing more fundamentally American than the rights and freedoms we all enjoy and should all defend, there's also nothing more American than the long and impactful history of immigration, right at the heart of our nation's story. And it shouldn't be the work of this committee or this Congress to aid this administration's attempts under the immoral and lawless leadership of the likes of Stephen Miller and Tom Homan to destroy the very liberties that make America special and strong. I deeply oppose this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Garcia, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Today is a shameful day in the House Judiciary Committee as Republicans move forward with their plan to trample on the Constitution and the working families so that they can give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. Let's take a step back and ask where our country is 100 days into the Trump administration. The economy is in the toilet, with people losing thousands of dollars in retirement savings and no progress being made on the affordability crisis affecting ordinary Americans. The executive branch is being gutted. Nothing has been done about actual waste, fraud, and abuse, like the nearly $1 trillion budget given to the Pentagon, which has never passed a financial audit. Instead, Republicans have turned over the keys to Elon Musk, who's trying to dismantle agencies that fight for workers and consumers over billionaires like him. Republicans have fought against diversity, equity, and inclusion, talking about merit. Meanwhile, Trump has anointed some of the most embarrassingly incompetent and unqualified cabinet members in our nation's history, like Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem. And to distract the country from the incompetence and the giveaways to billionaires and corporations, this administration is terrorizing immigrant communities. They are rounding up entire families, targeting unaccompanied children and people with no criminal history, denying them due process and defying judges and shipping them to Guantanamo Bay and spending millions in taxpayer dollars to jail them in a mega prison in El Salvador. They're even deporting U.S. citizen children with cancer. That is pure evil. But it doesn't stop there. Republicans know their agenda is unpopular. So they're running authoritarian crackdowns to stifle legitimate protest and dissent. They're throwing people in jail and deporting them on the basis of protected speech, attacking colleges and universities, and even going after law firms. All of this is cruel. It's incompetent, but it's also unconstitutional. And that's why Trump is losing in court. Over 100 court orders have been issued blocking his actions, many by judges appointed by Presidents Reagan, Bush, and even Trump himself. And the people of this country are realizing that none of this is in their interests. That's why Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating of any president in the past 100 years, and why he is underwater in every single issue. But Republicans don't serve working families, they serve billionaires and wealthy corporations. So here we are, faced with this cruel bill. Instead of doing anything to tackle the affordability crisis, Republicans are using reconciliation as the vehicle to advance their cynical agenda of giving trillions of dollars in tax breaks to people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, while cutting vital resources for our communities. Things like Medicaid, food assistance, and school lunches, Pell Grants for students, health care, and infrastructure. They're also going to gut asylum and spend tens of billions in a giveaway to ICE, a rogue agency that's terrorizing communities and trampling on civil liberties and the Constitution itself because they've been directed to do so by this president. Just look at what's in this bill. They want people fleeing violence and persecution to pay $1,000 so they can apply. They want people to pay $550 every 6 months to work. They want people to pay $900 to appeal rulings against them. They are commodifying the immigration system. And these giveaways to ICE, $45 billion for detention facilities, which in 13 years worth of their current detention budget. Over $1.3 billion for the Office of Principal Legal Advisor, $40 million to screen children for tattoos and other supposed gang affiliations. None of this makes sense for working families. I know this firsthand. My district is home to predominantly Latino immigrant and working class families, and my constituents are not asking for more tax breaks for Elon Musk. They're not asking for CFPB, the National Labor Relations Board, or the FTC to be gutted. They're not asking for Medicaid or food assistance to be cut. So I'm proud to stand with my district in opposing this assault on our communities. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Kamala Dove, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I move to strike the last word. You know, reading through this package, I was struck by how un-American it is. As un-American as arresting judges, trampling on our due process, deporting Americans, and terminating our federal workers. It is antithetical to the values of this country. We are essentially voting on a package that supports selling off citizenship to sometimes the least worthy while deporting babies with cancer, on top of cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security, cutting access to baby formula, cutting food assistance for kids. And then there is this fertilizer bill, which I like to say, which will also support terminating federal workers, which includes Capitol Police. I can't tell you how many Capitol Police have come up to me and asked me how their job is at stake and what's going to happen to them. And I say, well, don't go ask a Republican, because they are throwing you to the wolves. You know, reading through this package, I think of Horatio Algiers, an American author who wrote about rags to riches stories, those from humble beginnings who made it here because of the opportunity in this country. And that is the basis of immigration. You come here, you do not have to have money, you do not have to have a name, you do not have to have influence, but you have to have drive and grit and ideas and a diversity of thought. That becomes the currency that makes this country strong, that makes us unique. And what are we doing here with this package instead? We are saying that we don't value that kind of person anymore. We don't value diversity or strength. We don't value grit. All we care about is your check. But I'm here to tell you that is not what makes a workforce strong. That is not what makes industry strong, schools strong, this country strong. That is not a value system based on real merit. And instead of supporting innovators, earnest people with drive and ideas, like those immigrants that came here before us and helped make this country great, you are essentially saying that you're going to pay off citizenship to somebody who has the money to do so. They don't have to have any talent. They don't have to have any drive. They just have to have some kind of money in the bank. They don't have to be worthy. And to add some more duplicity to this fertilizer that we're going to be voting on today, Republicans talk so much about regulation, too much regulation. We need to deregulate the economy, the environment, our financial services, because so much regulation means less progress, less creativity, according to Republicans. But this here bill is about hyper-regulation, over-regulation. You're over-regulating how many people come here, who comes here, what they have to look like, how you kick them out, and not just undocumented folks, but Americans. Hey now, because we're seeing that happen. So I guess you have to raise enough nickels, since he's getting rid of the pennies, to pay for the tax cuts that you are getting to the richest of the rich, on top of cutting Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, things that people in my district care deeply about. And let me remind you that California has 7 of the 10 highest enrollee districts in this country when it comes to Medicaid. And another thing, I know Republicans, I talk to Republicans, I have Republicans in my district. And real talk, there are many Republicans who have fallen in love with immigrants, who have married immigrants, who have hired and mentored and worked with immigrants. And not all of those folks, not all of those immigrants were wealthy or came here with a big old dowry. But they came here with some drive, and they had ideas, and they had earnestness. Had enough for you to want to work with them, hire them, have ideas and dream ideas with them, fall in love with them, care about them. And how many of those folks would be allowed in this country today if this thing were in place? So let's just have some real talk when we are talking about voting on something that is un-American and antithetical to all of the values that we uphold, values that you would be upholding if the president were a Democrat instead of the one we have in office right now. So for these reasons and so many others, I will be opposing this bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair is now recognized for a manager's amendment. The clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of...
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The chair is recognized to explain the amendment. This amendment revises the ESTA, the Electronic System for Travel Authorization fee section, to lower the overall fee amount from $50 to $40 and increases the amount authorized to be transferred to Brand USA from $500,000 to $20 million. Finally, the amendment also removes the section that will consolidate antitrust enforcement authorities and resources in the DOJ Antitrust Division. And finally, the amendment also increases the funding provided to the Secret Service for additional resources, personnel, training, and technology from $1 billion to $1.17 billion. I urge all members to support the amendment, and I yield back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Domestic violence shelters, protection for judges, better training and support for police officers, and rebuilding trust between law enforcement and our communities. These are just some of the things that we should be investing in to truly make America safer. This committee has a $110 billion budget to protect our nation, instead of using it to support multiple agencies that handle safety, justice, and security. We're being asked to pour it all into just one agency, an agency that has been used to target and intimidate communities for this administration's political gain. That's not how we build real public safety. Meanwhile, our prisons, they're falling apart. Officers have come to my office and told me that pieces of their ceilings are literally falling on them as they work. Judges who face violent threats just for doing their jobs are left without enough protection. Just last Monday, a deputy in Texas was shot outside a courthouse. And did you know that it takes a victim of domestic violence, on average, 7 tries before they escape their abuser? We should be using this funding to help these victims and strengthen the agencies that support them. Right now, we're facing major safety and health problems all across this country. Agencies like the FBI, ATF, Federal Bureau of Prisons, U.S. Marshals, and our court system all need resources to do their jobs and to keep people safe. Yes, criminals should be arrested, and they should receive their due process. But we also need to protect our judges, keep our prisons safe and functional, and support victims before the worst happens. This committee, and every one of us in here, in this committee, has the power to pass a bill that takes all of this into account. One that actually makes America safer for everyone, and safer for everyone in this room. But focusing all this money on just one agency and targeting one group of people doesn't do that. It's not what the American people deserve. And it's not the reason why you sent us here to represent and support your interests. We need a balanced, thoughtful approach to public safety, one that puts real protection and real justice first, putting people over the partisan politics. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question occurs on the manager's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the manager's amendment is adopted. Who seeks recognition? Oh, can I do one thing real quick here? I ask unanimous consent that the letter from the Congressional Budget Office stating that the committee's reconciliation proposals comply with the instructions in House Concurrent Resolution 14 be included in the record. Without objection, they will be included in the record. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Move to strike the last word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That,
One of the little known passages, sections that snuck into this bill is the very last one, which is section 70303, called restriction of funds. What it does is it makes it much, much more difficult for a judge to enforce a contempt order. Wonder why the Republicans are trying to do that. As two judges have threatened to hold the administration in contempt of court for defying court orders, now the Republicans, rather than encourage the President of the United States to follow the rule of law, to follow court orders, including a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, are actually trying to make it easier for the president to violate court orders and violate the law. And this is the Judiciary Committee. Most of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are lawyers themselves. Their entire careers have been around abiding by the rule of law. And now, rather than hold the president accountable, uphold our Constitution, uphold the fundamental rule of law that undergirds our entire system, no, they are trying to limit the ability of courts to enforce contempt orders. Now, contempt orders are just simply orders by a judge holding someone in contempt when they do not follow a court's order. So when, for example, the administration continues to fly people who have had no due process to a terror prison in El Salvador after a judge has said, don't fly anyone there, that's a violation of a court order. And if that judge wanted to enforce that order, he would hold the administration in contempt. And if they do not comply with that, there are escalating penalties, financial, even potentially jail. So that is what's going on right now. And the Kilmar Abregu Garcia case is the best example of this because the Supreme Court has ruled unanimously. And let's be real, this is not a 5-4 decision that is hyper-partisan. This is the 3 Republican justices that Donald Trump appointed to the Supreme Court, and 2 others who are so far to the right of them, they're off the reservation, agreeing that the administration violated due process and needs to facilitate the return of the person who was, they admit, mistakenly removed. What does Donald Trump say last night? I have the power to return him, but I am not going to. That is direct defiance of a Supreme Court order, a 9-0 Supreme Court order. And you would think that my congressional friends on the other side of the aisle who take an oath to uphold the Constitution, who understand that Marbury versus Madison establishes that it is the courts, not the president, who gets to interpret the laws. It is the courts, not the president, who gets to determine whether someone should be deported or not. You would think that they would say, let's make sure that our president is actually following court orders. Because if he's not following court orders, then why would anyone else follow court orders? And our entire system breaks down. That is clearly what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to be a king who gets to make all of these decisions himself. He has already grabbed willingly all of Congress's power as a check and a balance on the executive branch. Now he's going after the courts. But instead of trying to uphold our system of checks and balances, my Republican colleagues want to make it easier for Donald Trump to disregard court orders. They are perfectly happy for Donald Trump to become a king, a dictator. And it is shameful that they put this clause in there to make it easier for him to defy court orders. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much. The amendment requires the government to provide due process to anyone removed from the United States by virtue of any funding in the bill. Now, I know most Americans are out there saying, wait a second, why do you have to inscribe due process into a budget reconciliation bill when it's already in the Constitution of the United States? And indeed, due process is already required by the Constitution, as the unanimous Supreme Court found in Donald Trump versus JGG on April 7th, just 3 weeks ago, in a 9-0 per curiam opinion. Quote, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in the context of removal proceedings." So both citizens and non-citizens enjoy due process under the Fifth Amendment, which says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So why do we need this amendment indeed? Well, President Trump and Stephen Miller and Elon Musk, a former undocumented immigrant himself, believe that people can be swept up out of their houses, out of their workplaces, off of the streets, and sent to a torturer's prison in El Salvador without any due process at all. And there they can remain for the rest of their lives. Does everybody understand that? They're taking the position that no due process is required when people are swept up off of the streets. And as numerous federal judges have pointed out, if they can do it to non-citizens, they can do it to citizens too. Because if you assert as your defense that you're a citizen, but you don't have the opportunity to get before a court, which is what a fair hearing under due process is all about, they can still get away with taking you out of the country. Now, and in fact, what one district, DC Circuit Court of Appeals judge, Patricia Millett, remarked when the argument was made that this was a power that was appended to the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, even assuming that that applies, even assuming that we're at war with Venezuela when we haven't declared it, even assuming that there's an invasion of our country when the courts doubt it, but even assuming all that stuff, she said, Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemies Act during World War II than has happened here. In other words, they got hearings. They got actual hearings. Now, whether these deportations are taking place under the Immigration and Naturalization Act or the Alien Enemies Act or any other statute makes no difference at all, because the Constitution is supreme to all statutes, and everyone is entitled to due process. All 9 justices of the Supreme Court agreed with his conclusion at, I think, 1 in the morning, or maybe it was 12:30. So, Mr. Chairman, why is due process such a fundamental American value? Why are these the two most beautiful words in the English language which separate our freedom from arbitrary government power? Well, the last several weeks provide vivid evidence of the profound and dangerous miscarriages of justice that can and will take place if we abandon due process. Take the case of Jose Reyes Barrios. This is a 36-year-old professional soccer player and coach. He's an asylum seeker from Venezuela awaiting the date of his asylum hearing. But unbeknownst to his family, he was arrested and swept up and flown out of the country to El Salvador as part of the government's dragnet campaign against Tren de Aragua. But he had no criminal record, there were no outstanding criminal charges against him, and he had no association with any criminal gang. And yet he was sent to the dictator of El Salvador because he has a tattoo on his right arm which was mistakenly associated with Tren de Aragua. In fact, the tattoo is of a soccer ball topped with a crown which signifies his favorite soccer club, Real Madrid. Had there been any kind of due process fair hearing, he would have been able quickly to explain the government's error. And there being no other evidence against him, he would have been released. Today, right now, he remains in prison in El Salvador. Consider the case of Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay makeup artist and barber who fled Venezuela's brutal Maduro regime, which was persecuting him simply for being gay. He had passed his credible fear interview here in America in the asylum process. In fact, his asylum claim was pending when he was swept up in the government's campaign because of his benign tattoos of two crowns, one symbolizing his father and one symbolizing his mother, which I see as my time run out, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, it has.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentlelady, California's recognized.
I ask to strike the last word, and I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you very kindly to the gentlelady from California. So Mr. Romero had passed his credible fear interview, which is a necessary part of the asylum process. He's waiting for his asylum claim to be heard. And then he was arrested. Why? Simply, again, because of tattoos, which I would remind everyone are not illegal in the United States of America. And millions of citizens and non-citizens alike have tattoos. Well, he had a tattoo, one symbolizing his father and one symbolizing his mother. And that became the sole basis for his removal. He missed his asylum hearing because he was behind bars in this notorious mega prison outside of San Salvador. 60 Minutes reviewed his media posts going back for more than a decade. They could not find a shred of evidence, not an iota of evidence linking him to any gang activity at all. If the government has some, of course, bring him back, produce the evidence. Nobody wants gang bangers who've committed crimes out on the streets. Bring him back and prosecute him. But you don't take an innocent person not facing any criminal charges and throw them into a torturer's dungeon in El Salvador. Take finally the shocking case of 24-year-old father Frangel Reyes, who now sits in the same El Salvador prison of dictator President Bukele, where he has been falsely accused as a gang member in this completely unilateral administrative process. Frangel not only has no criminal record, no criminal history, and no connections to Tren de Aragua, he doesn't even have any tattoos. Instead, he was picked up because someone else's information was accidentally pasted into his government's e-file. His government e-file. The document accusing him of gang membership actually lists someone else's last name multiple times and contains multiple different ID numbers. Again, they got the wrong guy. That's what due process is all about. Making sure that the government, which is not infallible, which is not perfect, which I've heard many of my friends on the other side of the aisle say before, should not be allowed to put somebody's life, liberty, and property in permanent jeopardy, put them behind bars forever without even the opportunity to say, you made a mistake, that's not my name, that's not my ID number. This guy's behind bars in El Salvador's infamous Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, where no visitors are allowed, no rehabilitation or education programming is taking place, and where prisoners are not allowed to spend any time outside. And if they can do it to non-citizens, they can do it to citizens too. Because if you get swept up and you allege your citizenship to try to keep from being banished to El Salvador, you've got no one to argue with if you don't get a due process fair hearing. Indeed, just last week, 3 U.S. citizen children, ages 2, 4, and 7, were sent to Honduras with what a Trump-nominated judge in Louisiana, Terry Doty, said was no meaningful due process at all. Due process are the 2 most beautiful words in the English language. They separate our freedom from the arbitrary and tyrannical power of government. And without due process, no one is safe from being falsely accused of being a gang member or a terrorist and summarily disappeared to a foreign gulag or dungeon. I trust all of my colleagues will support me in this amendment to ensure that our laws embody this most fundamental constitutional value. The money that we're appropriating today, the money that is going to be going out through the Budget Reconciliation Act, should not be used to fly people out of America and put into somebody else's prison without due process of law. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I would just add, Mr. Chairman, that a woman walking down the street, a graduate student, is approached by masked men in plain clothes, put in handcuffs, and put into an unmarked van and shipped off to a prison miles away. No due process. That could happen to anyone. That could happen to anyone. And that's why due process is in the Constitution, to protect the rights of every person here. We give that up at our peril and at the peril of our Democratic Republic, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak up strongly in support of the ranking member's amendment. I think it is really important that we understand what's going on. I think many times when you look at democratic backsliding and you look at authoritarians or wannabe authoritarians, what they do is they first target a population that is the most vulnerable. They target a population that they think that maybe they can win the sympathy of the American people or of any people in targeting that particular population. And the idea here is to show that if you can do it to that people, that group of people, then, and nobody says anything, then you can go further and do it to anybody else. And I think it is very important to recognize that in this moment, they are trying to say that due process does not apply to you if you're an immigrant. And now they've gone further than that because they're actually taking U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, people who are here with legal status already. So they've already moved on quickly to every person. And I just think it's important that we remind people that the Fifth Amendment's guarantee is that, quote, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And it applies to every person in this country, regardless of their citizenship or their immigration status. Now, the ranking member gave multiple examples of where due process was completely flaunted by the administration. And I think it's also important that we point out what happens when due process is provided. Because when you get the courts to weigh in on some of these cases, we are hearing how outrageous the judges think that these situations are. So I'll give you the example of a Venezuelan couple. This is Cesar and Norelia, who had temporary protected status. This is a legal status, had filed an asylum petition, and yet the administration arrested them 3 times. 3 times. And they alleged that because Noelia's husband, who she divorced over a decade ago, is now deceased, was involved with a gang, that the couple are de facto high-level gang members. Now, the government produced absolutely no evidence of any gang membership for the Venezuelan couple. And Judge Brickema of the Eastern District of Virginia said, when she looked at the evidence that was presented, because in this case, due process actually happened. They had to go to court, or they were forced into court. And the judge looked at the evidence and, quote, said, "This is a terrible, terrible affidavit. If this were before me in a criminal case and you were asking to get a warrant issued on this, I would throw you out of my chambers." I was shocked when I saw this. This is a direct quote from the judge. Now, in the Western District of Texas, Judge Briones, I hope I'm saying that right, was the next judge to review the government's very scanty evidence on the couple as they were rearrested after being summoned to Texas to stand trial. And that judge ordered them released and, quote, said, quote, "Respondents asked this court to accept their claims going off of nearly nothing to substantiate their mammoth claims that petitioner is a senior member or perhaps just a member or maybe at least the affiliate of a gang." The court would not accept this evidence, even in a case where only nominal damages were at stake, let alone what's at stake here. Beyond these shoddy affidavits and contradictory testimony, respondents haven't provided membership. They have not demonstrated to this court by a preponderance of evidence, let alone the required clear, unequivocal, and convincing evidence that the petitioner is a member of a gang, nor that she is an alien enemy within the meaning of the TDA proclamation. And the judge actually admonished the government for wasting judicial resources. I want to go through this case because it's important to understand that the government does not have evidence to present, which is exactly why they are trying to bypass the courts. If they have evidence, then show it. Show it. Go through the due process, go through the courts, have a judge look at it. There are ways you can get people to be deported and you follow the due process laws, but they don't have it. They don't have it. For all these people they are deporting, picking up with masked men. And God knows, who are these masked men? Can any masked man with an unmarked car come and pick up any U.S. citizen, any legal permanent resident, any student that's walking the grounds? Is that what the country has come to? Is that what my Republican colleagues are allowing to happen? So we should all support this amendment, and I hope that both sides of the aisle do that. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California, then Georgia.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized. They give you the TV.
We are 100 days in to this administration. If this was the how it started, how it's going meme, it started with people wanting cheaper eggs. Fair. Costs were going up. People were anxious, and they wanted to see the goods that they were buying at the grocery store, at Home Depot, at Walmart, they wanted to see the costs come down. The president promised that he would lower costs on day one. That is a quote. "I will lower costs on day one." He is 0 for 100. He's 0 for 100. That's how it started. How it started, how it's going. This is how it's going. The president deported a 4-year-old American citizen with cancer, stage 4 cancer. Took him away from his American citizen father and his American cancer treatment. People just wanted cheap eggs. And now you're deporting kids with cancer. We are so far off course from where the American people wanted this administration to go. I'm going to lower costs on day one. He's 0 for 100. Today, we saw that the first time since 2022, the GDP is going down. Your 401ks are 201ks. We had hoped it would just be a Trump slump, but now it's a Trump train wreck. But it's not just pocketbooks. It's our values that are under assault. A 4-year-old American citizen deported while fighting cancer. Man, that's cruel. That's just one of the worst things I can think of a government doing to its own people. But I guess it shouldn't surprise us that the gang that put national security secrets in the group chat, or the gang that fired CDC measles experts as it was raging in Texas, or the gang that was laying off people at the FAA as planes were crashing, I guess it shouldn't surprise you that their incompetency and their cruelty would merge and bring us this. On today's bill, Mr. Chairman, there was an opportunity to work with Democrats to address the immigration crisis. I want our border to be secure. I want security at the border. I want as many resources dedicated to that as possible, because I understand that as much as my colleagues and I want comprehensive immigration reform, the American people have told us we want the border secure. And the workforce crisis that we have in America, to address shortages in hospitality, food and beverage, agriculture, construction, we can't do that until we secure the border. You have partners here who want to help you do that. But you're deporting kids who are American citizens with cancer. So you not only have lost the Democrats, this was your strength, and every first 100 days poll shows that you've lost the American people. When I go home, I'm going to check in with a 7-year-old who's getting more and more curious about what I do at work. And I'm going to ask him, what did he do at school? And his response is never satisfactory, and it never is when you ask a little kid. But when he asks me what I did at work today, do you know what I'm not going to tell him? I didn't make it easier to deport an American citizen with cancer. What are you going to say? And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, first, they came for the Latinos outside of the Home Depots trying to get work so that they could feed their families. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a Latino at the Home Depot. Then they came for the Hispanic-looking folks wearing hats backward with tattoos, and they deported them to El Salvador. And I didn't say anything about that because I don't wear my hair backward, and I don't have any tattoos, and I don't look like a Latino. Then they came for the Latinas at home taking care of the children. They scooped up the Latinas and the children, some of whom were American citizens, one of whom was receiving treatment for cancer. They swept them up, took them off, and deported them. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a Latina. I'm not a little child who's an American citizen. Then they came back for the students studying on the college campuses who were here on student visas. They sent jackbooted thugs wearing masks to pick them up, take them thousands of miles away and put them in a private for-profit detention center where they languish at taxpayer expense. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a student on a foreign visa. And then they came and arrested a white female judge, a state court judge, presiding over her courtroom and the litigants therein, managing the affairs of her court. And they came and arrested her and perp walked her to jail. And I didn't say anything then because I'm not a judge, a white female judge, state court. But then they came for me. And I looked around and there was nobody left because I had remained silent and they had taken everybody off. Now, I just kind of paraphrased a poem written by a gentleman from Germany, which resonated back then as it does today. And it's important that the people understand what is happening with our constitutional rights in this country. Everyone is entitled to due process, whether or not you are documented or undocumented, whether or not you are a citizen or not. You're entitled to due process, and that is what this amendment seeks to affirm. That is well-established law that is being ignored, along with other parts of our Constitution, by this lawless tyrant who is our president. And so I support this amendment. I ask my colleagues to support it, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a short video I'd like to show.
Nice.
A family traumatized after armed federal agents busted into their home as they were sleeping and took almost everything they own. Problem is, they were not the people agents were supposed to be looking for.
News 4's Spencer Humphrey is here with their frightening ordeal. Spencer, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, get this. That family just moved here about 2 weeks ago from out of state, and this is how their life in Oklahoma got started. They say they told federal immigration agents they had the wrong people, but those agents kept treating them like criminals, even though they're all U.S. citizens. Fear.
I did feel at times I felt I was gonna die.
So much fear.
I kept praying. I said, God, please let me live through this moment.
Humiliation.
I was a zero. I was nothing.
Pure disbelief.
I just couldn't understand, how is this happening to us?
All just for wanting a fresh start.
Mr. Chair, on the morning of Thursday, April 24th, about 20 armed federal agents broke into a home occupied by a family of U.S. citizens in Oklahoma City who had just moved there 2 weeks prior from Maryland. ICE agents, mistaking the current occupants for the former, broke down the door, terrorized the family, and they repeatedly said, "We are citizens. You have the wrong people. We are citizens." It happened in the middle of the night. 3 children at gunpoint were forced outside to stand in the rain in their underwear while their mother pleaded with these agents to tell them what was going on. They ignored the pleas. They ripped apart the entire house. They seized cash, documents, electronics, their computers as evidence. When the family asked when they would get their stuff back, the agents responded, "Well, it could be days or it could be months." This was all a colossal mistake. The names on the warrant did not match the people who lived in the house. This is what we have created here. This is Trump's America. These were citizens who were treated like this. This is what we want you to open your eyes to. If it can happen, as we've said time and time again, if it can happen to folks with green cards, it can happen to citizens. And in Oklahoma City, we see a perfect example of that. This is what we're talking about. It's not other people. It's us. It's our neighbors. It's our friends. It's people who just moved from Maryland to Oklahoma for a better life and have their house destroyed. And they can't get answers. If we watch the rest of the news clip there, they're asking ICE, who's responsible for this? And then they're sending them to another agency, and they're sending them to another agency, and nobody is accountable for what happened to them. This is what my colleagues are trying to fund with this bill. Armed federal agents breaking into homes, even of U.S. citizens, traumatizing them, taking their possessions. This is Trump's America. That's why we continue to talk about due process. It's not some pie in the sky idea. It's what literally holds our country together. Without due process, without the belief in the Constitution, we are not Americans. That's what gives us the ability to say we are an exceptional country in the world, that everyone who lives here gets due process. And we're going to keep saying this over and over and over again for everyone who lives here. What happened to that family, once again, of American citizens in Oklahoma City should scare the hell out of all of us. And we should not be using this committee to find more money to pump into ICE so that these things can happen. This family is all of us. That's what we're trying to say today. This family is all of us. And I can't believe that in our name, on our watch, this is happening to people who live in this country. Open your eyes. Wake the hell up. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment from the gentleman from Maryland. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Could I request a recorded vote?
You certainly can. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Baumgardner? Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Yes.
Ms. Lofgren votes yes. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Liu votes aye. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Mr. Moore, you're not recorded. Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Gooden votes no.
Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry?
May state his parliamentary inquiry.
Could we just have the current tally?
The current tally is not done because the roll is open while we're waiting for members.
Oh, I just meant the existing tally.
Existing tally?
Yeah.
We have a couple Republicans on their way. We're not the only committee marking up the reconciliation package today. So.
Mr. Hunt? Mr. Hunt votes no.
Wait a minute.
Mr. Van Drew, you're not recorded. Mr. Van Drew votes no.
Well, you've been traveling for the
Ms. Lee votes no.
clerk will report. Actually, Mr. Nels.
Mr. Nels votes no.
Clerk report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 16 ayes and 18 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady is recognized to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is simple, and I hope that it has bipartisan support. It simply states that none of the funds in this bill may be used by Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain or deport U.S. citizens. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I hope we can all agree that U.S. citizens should never be detained by ICE or any agency conducting civil immigration enforcement. They certainly should not be deported. This should not be a partisan issue. It's about protecting the most basic constitutional rights of U.S. citizens. My Republican colleagues have loved to profess their commitment to the rule of law, and yet they remain silent as this administration tramples on the civil rights of U.S. citizens under the guise of immigration enforcement. ICE has zero authority to even detain U.S. citizens, as ICE's own policy states, quote, as a matter of law, ICE cannot assert its civil immigration enforcement authority to arrest and or detain a U.S. citizen. So I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, that ICE's policy memo related to detaining U.S. citizens be placed into the record.
Without objection.
And yet, since the second Trump administration began, a troubling pattern has emerged with U.S. citizens being detained by immigration authorities. You just saw a video clip that Representative Ballant played. I want to give you a couple of other examples. In late January, only days after President Trump was sworn in, 3 U.S. citizens were out shopping in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A toddler, his mother, and grandmother were detained and sent to an immigration detention center by immigration agents who questioned their immigration status just because they were speaking Spanish. Also in January, ICE arrested a U.S. citizen and held him for over 10 hours despite him having his identification documents on him. And just 2 weeks ago, a 19-year-old U.S. citizen from New Mexico, Jose Hermosillo, was detained by the Department of Homeland Security in Arizona and held for nearly 10 days. According to Mr. Hermosillo, he was in town to visit his girlfriend's family when he had a seizure and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Upon his release, Mr. Hermosillo approached a DHS official believing that the officer could help him. But instead, the officer accused him of being in the United States illegally and arrested him, despite Mr. Hermosillo saying that he was a U.S. citizen. Again, he was held for 10 days until his family was able to locate him. We're talking about a 19-year-old kid who was just released after having a seizure trying to get home. This is truly horrifying. Now, states like Florida are following this administration's dangerous and unlawful deport first and ask questions later approach. Earlier this month, a 20-year-old U.S. citizen in Florida was jailed by local police under a state anti-immigrant law that has already been blocked by a federal judge. Following the arrest of this U.S.-born American, ICE issued a detainer request that the local police keep him in jail, even though ICE had zero authority to detain him. And then just this past weekend, as was mentioned earlier, it appears that 3 U.S. citizens were deported, aged 2, 4, and 7. In the case of the 2-year-old, U.S. District Judge Terry Dowdy, who is a Trump appointee, said this American child received, quote, no meaningful due process. Based on reports, the child was detained unlawfully by ICE for 3 days until she was deported with her mom, who was undocumented. The child's father had filed a petition to get the child released into his custody, but was not allowed to communicate with the mother. These are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader, reckless approach to immigration enforcement that is wreaking havoc across our country. And it's sending a chilling message to entire communities that they are suspect in their own country solely because of their race, their ethnicity, or their heritage. In fact, there is a great article by New York Magazine that discusses all of these incidents, and again, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit that article for the record.
Without objection.
What's even scarier is where this is headed. The president has publicly suggested sending U.S. citizens to a gulag in El Salvador with a record of severe human rights abuses. Under the guise of immigration enforcement, this administration is eroding the foundational democratic norms enshrined in our Constitution. Detaining and deporting U.S. citizens because of reckless and indiscriminate immigration enforcement is unconstitutional, dangerous, and fundamentally wrong. And I hope that colleagues on both sides of the aisle would support this amendment. I urge every member to make it absolutely clear, no taxpayer dollars should ever be used to violate the rights of U.S. citizens. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Question. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I just wanted to speak in favor of the gentlelady's amendment. I mean, she laid out the due process reasons, the constitutional reasons why we should not be allowing taxpayer dollars to support the deportation of American citizens by ICE. But just looking at the day-to-day impact that we're seeing in our communities, 11% of my district is foreign-born. That is a mix of people who are citizens, green card holders, visa holders, some undocumented, but they have families. And their entire communities are terrified at this point because of the lawless behavior we're seeing from this administration. And we're seeing the impact in our communities. We're seeing kids not going to school. We're seeing employees afraid to go to work. We're seeing shoppers afraid to shop in our stores because this is a family, this is a community. People have mixed statuses within their families, within their communities. And when we have citizens who are scared, I talked to a young lady who is a citizen. She was adopted from another country. She's afraid to have any kind of traffic infraction for fear that she's going to be scooped up and deported. I mean, what is this doing to our country when we have this kind of willful abuse of people and emotions and the law? So I wholeheartedly support my colleague's amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just put the question to my Republican colleagues. This amendment simply says that the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement shall not detain or deport a United States citizen. If you vote no on this, you are supporting the federal government either detaining and or deporting American citizens. I don't understand how you'll be able to look yourself in the face knowing that you voted to allow our federal government to detain and deport United States citizens simply because you do not want to vote against something that Donald Trump may support. Do you have a thought of your own? Do you have a belief of your own? Or is everything literally just whatever Donald Trump tells you it should be? You are going to vote no on this. We know you're going to vote no. And I'm interested to see if anybody asks you why you voted no on this, how you're going to spin it. You may say, oh, well, United States citizens aren't detained or deported. False. False. By ICE, that is. They have routinely been falsely detained and held, and in some cases, as we now know, deported as children suffering from stage 4 cancer. So that one's not really going to work very well. Then you may say, I mean, there are always the old reliables like, oh, you know, I haven't read the bill yet. That's a good one. But I urge any one of my Republican colleagues just to stand up and say, I voted no because Donald Trump wanted me to. because we all know that's the reason why. You have spent 100 days handing over every single ounce of congressional authority that you control to Donald Trump's lawlessness and recklessness. You stay quiet when our Immigration and Customs Enforcement sends masked undercover agents to arrest people in ostensible violation of their student visa requirements because they wrote an op-ed. And let me be very clear, no one disagrees more with that op-ed than I do. But we do not arrest people because they write op-eds that we don't like. We also do not criminally investigate people because they spoke out against the president. I didn't hear anything about the president's executive order directing the Department of Justice to investigate 2 people who worked in his first administration. And what did they do? They disagreed with him. That's how Vladimir Putin operates. That's how dictators operate. That's how kings operate, although kings probably wouldn't even do that. And yet you just all remain quiet. You are a co-equal, and I say you because we all understand you are in the majority, you control what this body does. I can and will write letters to every cabinet official, and I'm quite confident that if it even reaches the secretary, he or she throws it in the trash. We cannot subpoena them. You can introduce legislation. We need you to introduce legislation. And yet you sit silently as the President of the United States defies court orders, denies due process, arrests American citizens, and sends our criminal justice system after people who disagree with him. Shameful. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman, you want Maryland or California? Gentleman from California.
The fact that Democrats and my colleague, Representative Pramila Jayapal, feel the need to even introduce an amendment that says ICE cannot deport U.S. citizens is batshit crazy. This should not even be a discussion. It is not even a question. U.S. citizens cannot be deported by ICE. It's the law, it's the Constitution. I will be astounded if Republicans vote no on this. I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to associate myself with the remarks of the prior 2 speakers, my colleagues, Mr. Liu and Mr. Goldman. I do want to disagree with one little thing that Mr. Goldman said. I've got a little quibble. I think he tucked in there that we're a co-equal branch of government, and I've heard that 5th grade dogma far too much recently. First of all, co-equal is not a word. Okay, that's the first problem with that. Secondly, if we're co-equal, why did James Madison say in the Federalist Papers that the legislative is the predominant branch of government? Why are we in Article 1? Why is the very first sentence after the preamble to the Constitution, all legislative power is vested in the Congress of the United States? Why do we have the power to impeach, try, and convict a president for high crimes and misdemeanors, and he doesn't have the power to impeach, try, and convict us? It's because we had a revolution against a king. And the founders understood the dangers of one person of whatever ideological persuasion getting into office and insisting on monarchical dictatorial powers against everybody else. Other than that, I agree very strongly with what Mr. Goldman had to say, which is I really don't understand why our colleagues who we know to have dazzling brilliance and personalities and commitment to the public good would go along with this consistent trashing of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It doesn't make any sense. And, our chairman, for whom I have great respect and admiration, I have seen him over the years. How does one go from being a libertarian railing about the deep state and the FBI and the Department of Justice and the jackboot thugs coming down on the rights of the people to becoming a supine, submissive authoritarian who votes against providing basic due process rights for the people against the government? I don't get it. I hope that we would never end up in such a period of partisan saturation that we completely suspend our critical thinking skills when it comes to our own party taking over the government and having someone seeking to become something like a monarch or an autocrat or a king. Now, they are rolling all over the legislative branch today. And Mr. Goldman suggests that it is because of the servility and the passivity, the caving in of our colleagues, and perhaps so. I perhaps have a somewhat more Machiavellian interpretation. Maybe if they brought all of these things that they're being struck down on in court to Congress, they couldn't get them passed. Maybe our colleagues wouldn't want to vote for them. I know there's certainly a dozen Republicans from swing districts who are terrified by that agenda. They would rather be hiding under their sofa in the Rayburn building than actually having to vote on these things. But they've certainly remained extremely quiet about what's taking place. So now we've got the opportunity to put some amendments on the table to say, take a stand. The gentlelady from Washington advances the most straightforward proposition in the world, which is that we should not be spending the money of the taxpayers, of citizen taxpayers, to detain and deport U.S. citizen taxpayers by ICE. Now, really, does anybody disagree with that? Or is the gentleman from New York correct that we're just marching in ideological lockstep today, and we're doing what we are told? When we get through this, is it possible that people are only going to be qualified to be selling flowers and incense at Dulles Airport with members of religious cults because they've just been following orders for year after year? I mean, it's a very depressing thought for the United States House of Representatives. So this is an amendment that everybody should be supporting. ICE should not be deporting U.S. citizens. ICE should not be detaining and shipping off to foreign prisons U.S. citizens, especially children who have cancer. This is not some kind of wild hypothetical that the gentlelady has dreamed up. This happened last week. This just happened. So we've got to make sure that the money that we are using from the taxpayers is used to protect the rights and the freedoms of the taxpayers. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California, then to Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman's recognized.
And I'd like to yield my time to Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. I just wanted to pick up again on what the ranking member said. This is an amendment about making sure that we follow ICE's own policy that it cannot detain U.S. citizens. And Mr. Liu is correct that it's batshit crazy that I got to introduce this amendment. But it is also the reality that I have to introduce this amendment because it is happening. The examples that I gave, multiple examples, and I could give you more, are happening. This is happening. ICE is detaining and deporting U.S. citizens. And so it is really important that my good colleagues on the other side vote for this amendment. And maybe I'm more hopeful for some bizarre reason than Mr. Goldman that maybe there's a couple of you that will. Maybe the chairman will. Maybe some of you will say that it is not appropriate for the Trump administration to deport U.S. citizens. Because guess what? You all represent U.S. citizens. That's who elected you. So if you vote no on this amendment, you are actually voting to be able to deport, for ICE to be able to deport your own constituents. And so I just want to remind you again, remind all of us that the reason I'm introducing this amendment is not theoretical. It is actually happening that U.S. citizens are being detained by ICE officials in the streets by masked men, in unmarked cars, in their homes, children who are in the midst of stage 4 cancer treatments. It is remarkable that I have to say all of these examples and that I have to actually introduce this amendment. But I'm doing it because it's happening right here in the United States of America. And it's happening to your constituents. The people that are the US citizens that are being arrested in red states and blue states, in your districts and my districts. And once again, if you can do this to one group, you can do it to any group.
Will the gentlelady yield for a question? I believe that you and I think it was 2 weeks ago, wrote a letter inquiring of ICE how many U.S. citizens had in fact been picked up, detained, and deported. And I hadn't heard anything back from that, and I'm wondering if you've heard anything back.
No, thank you. I have not received a single response to that. Maybe the chairman would help me to ensure that the Department of Homeland Security, the Trump administration, responds, because you are very powerful in your current role as chairman. And perhaps you could get an answer where the ranking member and I have not been able to. I can't imagine that anybody on the other side would want to vote no on this amendment. I really can't, because all we're talking about is ensuring that none of the funds that we are shoveling over in giant quantities to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is used against U.S. citizens. It is actually unlawful to do that, but that doesn't seem to matter because it's happening. So I really do hope that we have many members on the other side who actually stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to fight for my U.S. citizen constituents who elected me.
Would the gentlelady yield?
Yes, I would be happy to. Mr.
I just
Chairman.
wanted to say I think you hope in vain.
Well, here we are. Maybe somebody on the other side will prove the eternal optimist wrong, but I believe that maybe there is a moment in any country's history where the threats are so severe that the spine gets stiffened and that you realize that the enemy is yourself if you don't speak up, that the destruction of democracy happens because we allow it to happen. And I hope that my colleagues on the other side, I continue to hope that my colleagues on the other side recognize that and vote yes on this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Yeah, I was trying to think up all of those old horror movies that I used to watch when I was a kid, and I would just literally be shaking in my boots in the bed after watching one of those shows, like Alfred Hitchcock, or watching Frankenstein, or Dracula, Wolfman, The Birds, The Last Man on Earth, all of that scary stuff. And I was trying to figure out, why is it that my Republican friends on the other side of the aisle today are afraid to speak up and speak out? And if there was ever an amendment to speak up and speak out about, it would be this one offered by the gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Jayapal, which is simple. It just says, no funds made available by this subtitle may be used by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain or deport a United States citizen. So, I mean, she's not talking about undocumented immigrants having due process rights. You might disagree with that, although it is the law, but I'll respect folks who disagree and think that they should not have rights. But this is about United States citizens. Nobody would disagree with the fact that no United States citizen should be deported. I mean, that's not what we do. That's not how it is. But yet my friends on the other side of the aisle are frightened, terrorized to speak up and speak out about this bill. And I suspect that they will vote against it out of terror. And it just goes to show you the reign of terror that has been imposed on MAGA Republicans and non-Republicans. People throughout this country are living in fear. United States citizens, if you look like a Latino and have tattoos and wear your hat backwards, you are afraid, and you hang out at Home Depot, or you get caught up at Home Depot outside, walking to your car, you can be scooped up and sent to El Salvador. People are literally living in fear, American citizens. And that's why, unfortunately, we do need this amendment. And it's shameful that we have to introduce it, but it has to be done. And I'm just alarmed that my friends on the other side of the aisle are terrorized. It's indicative of the terror, the reign of terror that has been inflicted on the country by Donald Trump. It manifests itself by the lack of verbosity by members of the other side of the aisle in this very committee. I'm ashamed. And I'll yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the distinguished gentleman from Georgia for his insights there. You know, it was suggested to me by a Republican friend that immigration is really all that they've got left. They think that immigration, the way the president's handled it, is very popular. And of course, the stock market has taken this tremendous hit, $7 trillion loss. The economy is shrinking. He's plunged us into this trade war. His polling numbers are 39%, an historic record low. And so they think, well, if we all rally around immigration and we can scapegoat immigrants, then we'll be able to work our way back. What's interesting is when I opened, I began with some comparisons of Donald Trump's numbers to other presidents in our history, and you can look at almost any of them. Like take Harry Truman, for example. He was at 87% at this point. He had double the approval ratings of Donald Trump. And here's what he had to say about due process, okay? Moreover, the guilty as well as the innocent are entitled to due process of law in America. They're entitled to a fair trial. They are entitled to counsel. They are entitled to fair treatment from the police. Harry Truman would never get on the bandwagon of saying, let's sacrifice the rights of immigrants somehow to become popular. And that made him popular, that he stood up for the Constitution and he stood up for the Bill of Rights. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia. Yeah.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the terror on the Republican side of the aisle. And it is true that we've had, since Magna Carta, fundamental guarantees of due process. But this administration doesn't afford anyone due process. The president doesn't afford due process to fellow Republicans. The president has removed security, has instructed the Department of Justice to prosecute. Imagine a president instructing the Department of Justice to prosecute someone, has instructed the Department of Justice to prosecute former Republican high officials who have earned or somehow gotten the ill regard of the president. He has told the Justice Department, prosecute, I forget the names, a number of people, remove the protection from people who served in my first administration, who, as a result of that service and being involved in the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, are under threat from the Iranian government, but because I don't like them anymore, remove the protection. And he is showing, through everything he's doing with deporting American citizens and saying, well, it's okay. It's okay to deport citizens. It's okay to deport people without due process of law, without a court. And Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, let the cat out of the bag. She said, we are all terrified. We are all afraid. Well, that's how you destroy liberty in a country. when you make United States senators afraid, when you make citizens afraid, citizens who've committed no crime, when you break into somebody's house and ransack it, and don't check because you have the right to ransack anybody's house. This is how you destroy respect for law. This is how you destroy civil rights, civil liberties. This is how you make this country a tyranny. And that's what they're trying to do. That's what he is doing and having success in doing. And we must, if this committee means anything, we must say, here we stand. Here we stop. We are the Judiciary Committee. We say what the limit of the law is. And therefore, we put a limit on him. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from, I don't know who's went the most recent. We'll go to the gentleman from California, then the gentlelady from Cal. We'll go ladies first. Gentlelady from California.
Go ahead.
I appreciate you. Wow, this seems like such a no-brainer. None of the funds made available by this subtitle may be used by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain or deport a U.S. citizen. And I was sitting here thinking, good Lord, Republicans must be in some kind of diabolical paralysis if they are unwilling to stand up for the Constitution for Americans by not supporting this bill. And then I had to read it again. I said, maybe I'm missing something, because, you know, I'm from California. But I was like, well, wow, deport to where? Because, like, if you're an American, you're going to deport an American to where? What the heck? Because I can't say what I'm really thinking. I'm so confused. And then I'm like, well, then who do you stand for? Do you only stand for Trump? Like, what do you stand for? Because if you're not standing up for the Constitution, which, is also to protect you. You know, like, I don't agree with you most of the time I am awake and half the time I'm asleep, but I still believe you have rights. So, like, if you don't even support this language, who do you stand for? Because, you know, I guess what you're saying is that Americans have no rights. You have no rights, and the only right you have is to obey Trump. The only right you have is to be silent and complicit in whatever comes out of this administration. But you don't have a right to your rights. You don't have a right to your civil liberties. You don't have a right to any freedoms. You don't even have a right to stand up and speak out. And you, as an American, could be deported, but I just don't know to where. And, you know, the ranking member said that he talked to Republicans who said, well, you know, this is a popular thing, you know, for Republicans, this immigration thing, and it's not. You know, 78% of Americans say they want a president who obeys the law. 88% of Americans say they want a president to certainly obey the law if the courts tell the president to obey the law. We have opened the door. We have walked back into babies in cages, to our neighbors, you know, our soccer teammates, our neighborhood store owners being deported. We have seen babies in their underwear being strip searched by people who are like, sorry, my bad, wrong address, but I'm still dehumanizing you, taking away all your stuff, and taking away your rights and liberties. I mean, this little sheet of paper just says, please follow the law and give an American citizen their rights, which you can still debate in court, but the premise is they have some. So I'm just so bizarrely confused. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, so then if you are gonna not support this, then like what happens when an American, one of your constituents, one of your neighbors, heck, a family member goes overseas and gets snatched? You're not gonna fight to bring them home? I don't know what could be like on your laptop or in your book or whatever right now that has got you so hypnotized that you would not engage in this conversation with your colleagues and find a way to stand up for the Constitution and the rights of Americans, even Americans that you might not agree with or don't like or don't look like or haven't met. Have you met every single representative? I mean, every single constituent that you represent in your district? God bless you if you have. But even if you haven't, you still have to represent them. So if they're in trouble and they call you, you're supposed to help them. If you don't support this, you're saying, if you call me, I'm not going to help you. What kind of representative are you? Shame, shame, shame. Game of Thrones, shame. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California, then Georgia.
Thank you. And I'm going to yield to our ranking member.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding. I suppose all I would say is on the question of whether or not an anti-constitutional agenda is a popular agenda, which seems to be kind of the currency of the day among our friends. People want to see the law enforced, but all the laws enforced, including the Constitution, including due process, including the rights of the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. People want to see all of the laws enforced together. And this is why I come back to why Donald Trump has historically low popularity ratings now, historically high unpopularity ratings. It's in the gutter because he's not delivered on any of his economic promises. He didn't get us cheaper eggs. He got us eggs Benedict. He sold us out. He betrayed us, and he's not delivering on the economy. He's crashing the stock market. He's plunged us into trade war with the whole world except for his buddies in Putin's Russia. And so now it all comes down to immigration, that they think what the American people want is to violate people's rights. I don't think anybody campaigned on that. I don't think anybody wants that. And I think, as the gentlelady from California just expressed, the polls show that the American people want due process to be observed. The American people want the President of the United States to comply with court orders and not violate court orders. The American people want us to remain a nation where the Constitution is supreme, not where the president is supreme. They want us to be a nation where the Constitution and federal laws govern, not the whim and the will and the fancies of one guy. That's not what people bargained for. So I would beseech President Trump and anybody who's got influence with him, your numbers are in the dumps, 39%. Look at Harry Truman, 87%, and he gave a beautiful speech in defense of due process, in defense of the Constitution. So if all you care about is your polling numbers and you don't care about the Constitution you're sworn to uphold and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic, the polling numbers tell you what to do. Stand with the people, stand with our Constitution, stand with our Bill of Rights. It's much bigger than any one of us. It's much bigger than any single politician. And the cat's got their tongue today because they don't want to talk about the Constitution. They don't want to talk about the Bill of Rights. They don't want to talk about due process and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in America. But that's what we were sent here to do. And we're going to stand up for the Constitution. We're going to stand up for the Bill of Rights. We're going to stand up for due process. We're going to stand up for the independence of the judiciary. So no, we are not going to follow our colleagues in putting up wanted signs for judges. We're not going to follow our colleagues in saying that federal judges should be impeached because we disagree with their opinion. As Chief Justice Roberts said, the proper response to a district court opinion you disagree with is you appeal the opinion, you don't impeach the judge. We've impeached 15 judges in all of American history. They were impeached for corruption, for bribery, for tax evasion. One guy was impeached for habitual drunkenness on the bench. It wasn't even occasional, it was habitual, but nobody's been impeached because of the substance of their opinion, much less the correct substance of their opinion. Our colleagues don't even tell us which opinions they think were wrongly decided. I mean, you take Donald Trump's debut executive order. He's going to strip people of birthright citizenship in America. That was the first sentence of the 14th Amendment in 1868, reversing the Dred Scott decision, which had based citizenship on race. We replaced racial citizenship with birthright citizenship in America. Then Donald Trump, in the year 2025, purports to overthrow it. That was struck down by 4 judges, an Obama judge, a Biden judge, a Reagan judge, and a Bush judge. And the Reagan judge said that it was the most unconstitutional thing he had seen in his 4 decades on the bench. He said it was the easiest case he ever had to decide because the first sentence of the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of their state. And citizenship means something, or at least it should mean something, and that was the whole purpose of this amendment, that U.S. citizens should not be stripped of their rights and detained or deported by ICE. And I yield back and thank you.
And reclaim my time. Mr. Chairman, I just want to put this offer out there for you. I'm willing, if you're willing to accept this amendment and vote for it and agree that no American should be exiled or disappeared, I'll drop all of my amendments. I've talked to some of my colleagues. They'll do the same. We won't vote for the bill, but we would take the win. So would you agree to that, Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman's time has expired. We will debate each amendment.
Is that a no?
No, we're going to debate each, we're going to move in regular order. We'll debate each amendment that you guys offer. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been listening to all of this rhetoric and listening to all of this discussion. And what I want to say is really, really very simple. It's an example of what we are about to embark on in this country. I think it is an infringement upon our civil liberties, our civil freedoms, our right to exist. I have a cousin, a first cousin. She's an Afro-American Mexican, all right? I talk to her almost 2-3 times a week. And I can tell you how many times now she has said to me over and over again that there's someone who continues in her neighborhood to call and question whether or not she's actually a citizen of the United States and actually whether or not she really lives here or belongs here. She continues to tell me the numbers of times now that law enforcement has been moving through her community, a pretty nice community in Joliet, Illinois, and how many times she's been stopped and asked, do you live here? Where do you live? What is your address? What do you do? Over and over again now. And so I fear that we're really beginning to fall in a very slippery slope of vigilantism here in this country based upon racial identity, based upon immigration, deportation. And my cousin is scared to death. She was born and raised in Joliet, Illinois, but she's afraid to walk in her own neighborhood because she is being pinpointed over and over again by someone in her neighborhood who claims that she doesn't belong here, that she doesn't live here. Born and raised right within Joliet, Illinois. This is what our citizens are going to be dealing with. Living, breathing while Hispanic. Living, breathing while Black. Living, breathing other ethnicities. And always questioning whether or not you belong. If you are a United States citizen, you were born and raised here, you belong here. And no one should be questioning whether or not you're a criminal, or questioning whether or not you have criminal intent, or whether or not you belong here. And it's really sad to say that everything that we have said, that my Democratic colleagues have said here today, I'm so sad. America, please understand and listen. This is falling on the deaf ears of our Republican colleagues. They're not even paying attention, and they could care less. So I'm just saying to you, with every fiber in your being, pay attention, because this is where the United States of America is headed under this administration. But I guarantee you that my colleagues and I will not sit back and let this happen without a fight. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Vermont, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I associate myself with remarks of my colleagues, and obviously I strongly support this amendment. It's very simple. We will not be using funds to deport or detain U.S. citizens. And as others have said before me, this should be something that everyone can get behind, because as my colleague from California said, what do you stand for? What do you stand for? What are you made of? If not this, then what? When I first ran for office to serve in Congress, I was asked, what do I think is the biggest threat facing us in the world? And I was unequivocal, and it was immediate. I said, the rise of authoritarianism around the globe. Democracies do not fail overnight. It happens little by little as rights are eroded, as norms are upended. As my colleague from Georgia said, when Americans start spying on each other and reporting people because you suspect they may not be a citizen. That's how it starts. And as my colleague who introduced this amendment has said, my colleague from the state of Washington has said, it's not as if this is theoretical. This is not, as we often say in legislative branches, oh, this is a solution in search of a problem. That's not where we are. It's actually happening. It's happening to American citizens. And so this should be the simplest vote that we take all year, that we will not use funds and weaponize our government against citizens and create a reign of terror and fear. So again, what is it that we stand for? What are we doing here if not to support and uphold the Constitution? And others have talked about Senator Murkowski, and I think many of us were hoping that when she finally said out loud what many of us have heard from our colleagues, that they'll say behind closed doors that they are afraid, that they do not want to be targeted. They do not want their families to be targeted. They do not want the president tweeting about them. They do not want Elon Musk tweeting about them. They do not want people to show up at their doors. They're not just afraid of losing an election. They will tell you they are keeping their heads down so that nobody will notice. Well, here's the deal. This isn't going to go away. It isn't just going to fade away. If we don't stand up for the things that make us Americans, if we don't stand up for due process, if we don't stand up for all of the ideals that we hold so dear, then we mean nothing. This country means nothing. We are only as good as the ideals that we uphold. And so again, what is it that you stand for? This is the simplest thing, that we will not weaponize our government and use funds to detain or deport American citizens. Now, as somebody whose family was impacted directly by the Holocaust, I can tell you that is why I'm so animated today. That is why I am so anxious and so angry about this. Because I know what happens. Because it happened to my own family. that neighbors ratted my family out. That's how it starts when we don't stand up for basic human dignity and the rights that we are afforded in this country. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Who else seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'd like to first associate the gentle ladies, my remarks with the gentle ladies' remarks, because some things just should not be debatable. And one of the things that we know is that the Constitution is really supposed to be a guiding light. And the reason that we're having to do amendments like this one and the other one and talk about things such as due process and the Constitution is because we could actually avoid maybe detaining or sending away U.S. citizens if we just gave them their due process rights. Because I'm tired of hearing, oh, they made a mistake. Well, guess what? That mistake may cost somebody their job. That mistake may cost somebody their home. That mistake may cost somebody actually being able to still have their child, because authorities may be called because that person is now not showing up to pick up their child. Or some people don't have the privilege of having a salary job where whether they show up or not, they're still going to get paid. Some people need to be at work. And so if you care about U.S. citizens, we know how y'all feel about immigrants, but if you care about U.S. citizens, I don't understand why this would be debatable, because if there's anybody that we're fighting for, all supposed to be fighting for, it should be U.S. citizens. In fact, it's U.S. citizens that are the ones that send us here, not Donald Trump. And so with that, we should be looking out. We should have their back, and we should say, as the federal government, we will not do things that are directly going to disenfranchise our citizens. And that's exactly what this is. But if we just followed the Constitution and gave people their due process rights, then maybe they could show up and prevent some of these mistakes. And maybe these mistakes that maybe seem so small to y'all because maybe the people that are being targeted have a little bit more melanin. So maybe we don't care about the mistakes that happen with some of those folk. I don't really understand. But I'm tired. And frankly, I think y'all should be tired too. Because I think no matter what district you come from, if you were to survey your district, there is no one in your district that would say that we should spend money on ICE, immigration and customs enforcement, to detain or deport, which you can't even deport, detain and kidnap, or detain and whatever, unlawfully restrain a U.S. citizen. Not anyone in your district would actually support that. I would put money on it. And so this absolutely should be a no-brainer. And I thank you to the gentlelady from the state of Washington for proposing just common sense, which seems like it is not so common nowadays. I will yield.
Gentlelady yields. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Washington. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed.
Seeking a recorded vote, Mr. Chairman.
A recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Issa, Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock, Mr. Tiffany.
No.
Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey, Mr. Roy, Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden, Mr. Van Drew, Mr. Nels, Mr. Moore, Mr. Kiley, Ms. Hageman, Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee votes no. Mr. Hunt, Mr. Fry, Mr. Grothman, Mr. Knott, Mr. Harris, Mr. Onder, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Gill, Mr. Baumgartner, Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Liu votes aye. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Aye. Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Aye. Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballot?
Aye.
Ms. Ballot votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager-Dove?
Aye.
Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett?
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Schmidt, you are not recorded. Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Ms. Hageman votes no. Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Gooden votes no.
The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 11 ayes and 12 noes.
The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman?
Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The gentlelady from California is recognized. Close.
It was close.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee print offered by Ms. Lofgren. Page 16, strike line 6, and all that follows through line 2.
Without objection, the amendment is considered read.
Mr.
The gentlelady is recognized to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would strike the $3,500 fee imposed by this bill to sponsor an unaccompanied minor. Now, there is a phenomenon, I've seen it over the years, where things are so desperate in a country that children, including really small children, show up at our border. And I can recall a number of years ago going down when a very large number of children, including 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, were apprehended at the southern border. Now, Congress had, and the courts have come up with a protocol to deal with this situation. In 1993, the Supreme Court case Reno versus Flores set forth a preference for the release of immigrant and refugee children from custody, and this is their words, without unnecessary delay. And they recognize that the child welfare principles that support children's care means that they will be released in the least restrictive setting appropriate to their needs, as well as the rights of parents and legal guardians. I was on this committee when a bipartisan majority of the Judiciary Committee approved the Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act. And that bill, the TVPRA, provides similarly that an unaccompanied alien child in the custody of the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall promptly be placed in the least restrictive setting that is in the best interest of the child. Now, what happens when an 8-year-old shows up at the border? First, they're brought into the custody of the Border Patrol, but Health and Human Services is directed to look after that child until they can be placed with a sponsor in the United States. Oftentimes, that sponsor is a member of their family, but it is not unknown that the foster care system will be utilized for the placement of that child. It is important that children be maintained in an environment that is nurturing and non-custodial. And the idea that we would essentially tax people who are willing to take in a child that's been abandoned is contradictory to what our goals are as a decent nation. Now, the immigration, USCIS is one of the, I think, of only 2 agencies in the federal government that is entirely funded by fees, the other being the Patent Office. And so fees go up and down to cover the costs of activities, and that's not wrong, but it would be wrong to tax a foster family for taking in a child that has shown up at the border and is by themselves and helpless. So I understand we'll discuss a variety of proposed fees in this bill, but this one is a mistake, and we should not do this. I'll just note that we've got another provision that this committee adopted many years ago that allows for a child that who has essentially been abandoned for a state court to find that that child has been abandoned and they become a special immigrant juvenile. In that case, they can become a legal permanent resident of the United States, but they can never petition for their parents who abandoned them. It just creates the humanity that the United States is known for, that we take care of vulnerable children, that we make sure that they are kept in an appropriate environment, and that we don't put barriers to their care in place. I'll note just one other thing. The fee structure in the Immigration Code is always used to support the immigration system. There's only one instance I can think of, and that was a fee on B visas that was used to promote tourism, and it was a very small fee, but that should not be used as precedent for this extraordinary proposal that I think would end up keeping children in custody for a long time, and by the way, would be costly for the American taxpayer, even while being adverse to the children involved. So that's why I offer this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I see that my time has expired.
Who seeks recognition to speak on this amendment? The gentleman recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just I have a quick question, if the sponsor of the amendment would yield. Can you tell us about who are the people who generally act as sponsors of unaccompanied children? Or is it generally family or friends, or is it strangers? And what are the risks of creating a $3,500 fee?
Well, it's oftentimes a family member, although not always. It could be a friend of the family. What should happen, and what does happen, is if it's a family member, there is an analysis that through rapid DNA, that the person actually is a family member. That's very important, because these children, if placed recklessly, could be victims of trafficking. They could be exploited by sex traffickers. So you need to make sure that they're being placed with somebody who's reliable and who will look after their interests. There are times, and in fact in 2014, when we had such a large number of children show up, children were in fact placed in foster homes around the country, foster homes that were recruited by the Department of Social Services in California. So in some cases, this would be a fee on local government that has a foster care system. But the whole system needs to be oriented towards protecting the child. And I know sometimes people say, well, you know, these are 17-year-old kids, but you know, when the wave of unaccompanied children hit a number, well, about 10 years ago, I mean, there were 3-year-olds. Things had become so desperate in the home countries that parents made a decision to save their children. And I saw in one instance a grandmother who brought her grandchild and the grandchild and the grandchild's neighbor. The grandmother couldn't enter the U.S. She knew that, but she came here to save these little kids, and they were 5, 8 years old, and there they were in the Border Patrol station. They needed to be placed with a trusted family member, an aunt, in Chicago, or a foster family. In fact, in Santa Clara County, the Board of Supervisors decided that they wanted to make sure that these children were cared for, and members of the community stepped forward to become foster parents of these children, ultimately adopted some of them. So there's a whole structure in place, but to put a barrier, a fee involved, would disrupt that. And what it would end up with was, you might have individuals with nefarious intentions trying to get these kids because they have the money, or more likely, you would end up with these kids in institutional settings at taxpayers' expense. And one of the things we learned after the wave of unaccompanied minors, and there was a lot of study of this, is that putting children in these kind of grim institutional settings has a very severe impact on them throughout their lives. And so to do anything that would enhance the capacity of these children being neglected, essentially, and being put in a sterile, sort of custodial, almost incarceration type of situation, is not in keeping with our American values. And I hope, even though we may argue about other parts of this bill, but I would hope that we would step back from this, because it's really not the right thing to do. And I thank the gentleman for his question.
And I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Who seeks recognition? The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No.
Mr. Chairman, I would like a recorded vote on that.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. The gentlelady asks for a recorded vote. The clerk will call the vote.
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Issa, Mr. Biggs, Mr. McClintock. Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany?
No.
Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett?
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Gooden votes no.
Chair votes no.
Mr. Chairman votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 ayes and 14 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to. Who seeks recognition?
have an amendment at the desk.
The gentleman from California is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me. Clerk will report.
Thanks.
Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves a point of order. Clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
Without
substitute.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
This amendment plainly says the Department of Justice will not fire veterans. So if you vote for this amendment, you're going to stand up for our veterans who work at the Department of Justice. If you vote against it, you're going to really screw them over. This would make it unlawful for an employee of the Department of Justice who held a veteran preference status to be fired for the, quote, sake of government efficiency. As many of you know, and many of you are veterans yourself, and I thank you for your service to our country, when veterans leave their service, whether they retire after a long career or after they fulfill their duty requirement, they oftentimes continue to serve the public, and they often do it through the federal government. And one of the agencies where they do it the most is at the Department of Justice. However, no president has fired more veterans than Donald Trump. Not a surprise for a guy who refers to our service members, those who have paid the ultimate price, as suckers and losers. Our veterans are not suckers and losers, and if they were hired after their service to work in the federal government under a veteran preference, they should be protected. Now, my Republican colleagues just showed that they will not protect U.S. citizens from being deported. They just voted to allow Donald Trump to deport U.S. citizens. The same week that Donald Trump deported a 4-year-old child citizen battling cancer. Will you treat our veterans the same way you just treated U.S. citizens by making them susceptible to deportation, by making our veterans eligible to be fired by DOJ? Prove me wrong. Vote for this amendment and you protect our veterans. Vote against it, you screw them over. I yield.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
I would yield, yes.
I want to thank you for introducing this. I've been also scandalized by the fact that thousands of veterans have been targeted in these mass layoffs and firings across the government. Of course, a lot of courts have tried to stop these firings because they're not done with any respect for the rules of the civil service, which say you can only be fired if you yourself have engaged in professional misconduct or you're not living up to the requirements of your job, if you're not performing, right? But your amendment says that the administration should not be firing people who hold a veteran's preference without cause. In other words, you would still allow them to be fired if they're not showing up to work, if they're not living up to their responsibilities. You're just saying, vote here not to sack veterans for no reason at all.
That's exactly right.
And I assume this is one where you've been able to get support from the other side of the aisle.
I hope so, Mr. Ranking Member, considering how many of our colleagues from the other side of the aisle are veterans themselves who represent thousands of veterans in their district. So this is going to be a test for them. Will they stand for our veterans or will they screw them over?
Well, it seems to me we've just seen one vote where our colleagues said it would be all right for Donald Trump to detain and deport U.S. citizens. Another vote where they said it would be okay to detain and deport people without due process. You put those two together, it sounds like they're saying that citizens can be deported and detained without due process. And now what you're saying is, can we at least have some mercy on veterans who have a preference within our civil service, but who've been sacked without any kind of due process at all?
That's right. And to my Republican colleagues, I'll say this. Look, you don't have to take a vote on every vote. If you want to take a walk on this one, because you don't want to go home and tell your veteran constituents that you just screwed them over. Now may be a good time to go get a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom. You don't want to take this vote. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from Wisconsin insist on his point of order?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized to explain.
The gentleman's amendment would introduce material beyond the scope and purpose of the bill before us and therefore violates House Rule 16, Clause 7. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The chair is prepared to rule. The gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized?
Yes. The sponsor of the amendment wished to be heard.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, again, this plainly makes it clear that a department which we have jurisdiction over, where thousands of veterans work, that those veterans will not be fired under any government efficiency act. Of course, if there is for cause, they are subject to a for cause firing as anyone else. But this amendment, which I understand why you would want a procedural trick to keep it from being voted on, stands up for our veterans. And I think anything less than protecting our veterans, even a procedural trick, is screwing over our veterans.
Yeah, there's not. I would just make clear to the gentleman from California, not a procedural trick. We talked with your counsel. We would try to get this in, but it's clear that employment status is all within the jurisdiction of the Oversight Committee, not the Judiciary Committee. The gentleman's amendment does not satisfy the subject matter and fundamental purposes test. Therefore, it is not germane and is out of order. Who seeks recognition? What I'd like to do is, votes have been called. We will recess for votes, and then I think we have 3. And then as soon as they're done, if we could get back and get started again, Chair would appreciate that.
Committee stands in recess.
Committee stands in recess.